the migrant crisis fuels debate over Britain's future in the European Union. In the race for the White House, outsiders Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders win big in the New Hampshire primary. And how the fall in the price of oil has Nigeria, Africa's oil king, rattled. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Now, the migrant crisis in Europe is dire, and it's fueling the debate in Britain ahead of a possible referendum on staying or leaving the European Union. Prime Minister David Cameron warns that leaving the EU could lead to even more migrants arriving in Britain. Meanwhile, as Henry Ridgwell reports, in France, thousands of migrants are living in squalid conditions.
London calling. The graffiti at the so-called jungle camp in Calais, where around 4,000 migrants live in makeshift tents and shipping containers, desperate to get to Britain. Under a 2003 agreement, British border checks are performed on French soil in Calais, which keeps the migrants in France. Speaking Monday, British Prime Minister David Cameron warned that deal would be threatened if Britons voted to leave the European Union.
There are a lot of opposition politicians in France who would love an excuse to tear up that treaty and would like the border not to be in France but to be in Britain. And I don't want to give people an excuse to do that.
Border police and migrants play a constant game of cat and mouse in Calais port. Migrants try to sneak into trucks as they board ferries bound for Britain, or even break into the tunnel that carries trains beneath the channel. There is also growing tension between migrants and the local public. Members of the anti-Islam group Pegida, which was founded in Germany, attempted to stage a march in Calais Saturday, despite local authorities banning all public protests.
Elle s'imposera aussi à tous les provocateurs.
These people do not want the common good. They just want to exploit poverty and anger, and they have no place in Calais.
Ils n'ont rien à faire à Calais.
In recent weeks, the migrant camps have been hit by snow and winter storms. Doctors Without Borders, the only major charity working around Calais, says conditions at one camp near the town of Dunkirk desperately need to be improved.
There's about 2,500 people living there at the moment, mainly Kurds from Iraq and from Syria. And the conditions in that camp are really horrific. People are living in this kind of muddy wasteland. There's rats. People are getting scabies because of poor hygiene.
Doctors Without Borders successfully lobbied for a new camp to be built in Dunkirk, which is due to open later this month. The longer-term fate of the camps and of its residents could depend on Britain's choice, widely expected later this year, to stay or leave the European Union. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
Well, the United Nations Security Council is holding a private briefing Wednesday on the tragic humanitarian situation in Syria, where government forces backed by Russian airstrikes are waging an offensive against rebels in Aleppo. The operation has sent tens of thousands of people fleeing toward the Turkish border. The Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says at least 500 people have been killed in the offensive. A U.S. State Department spokesman on Tuesday reiterated criticism of Russia's air campaign. Russia has repeatedly rejected criticism of its operation in Syria, backing President Bashar al-Assad. Rebel groups say they want the bombing to stop before returning to UN-sponsored peace talks. Well, in the race for the White House, Donald Trump towered above the Republican competition in the New Hampshire primary, and outsider Bernie Sanders was a big winner in the Democratic race over Hillary Clinton. The results suggest long and perhaps bitter fights ahead for both parties' nominations. VOA national correspondent Jim Malone reports from Manchester.
For Republican Donald Trump, it was a moment to savor.
Oh, wow. Wow, wow, wow. So beautiful.
After a disappointing second-place finish in the Iowa caucuses, this self-styled non-politician known for blunt talk enjoyed a victory lap in New Hampshire.
we are going to start winning again. And we're going to win so much. You are going to be so happy. We are going to make America so great again, maybe greater than ever before. I love you all.
But the surprise in the Republican race was the second-place finish by Ohio Governor John Kasich.
There's magic in the air with this campaign because we don't see it as just another campaign. We see this as an opportunity for all of us, and I mean all of us, to be involved in something that's bigger than our own lives, to change America.
There was a crowded battle to follow Kasich among Iowa caucus winner Ted Cruz, former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, and Florida Senator Marco Rubio. In the Democratic race, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders scored a major victory over frontrunner Hillary Clinton.
The government of our great country belongs to all of the people and not just a handful of wealthy campaign contributors and their super PACs.
Clinton urged her supporters to look ahead to upcoming primaries where she is favored.
You are the reason we are here, and you are the reason we are going to win the nomination and then win this election together. Thank you all.
Your name, please.
Throughout New Hampshire, voters swarmed polling stations, like this one in Merrimack, where Trump supporters were out in force.
He's not the ultimate conservative, but I do believe that in his heart he loves the country, and I think he can put a beating on the media.
As were those backing Bernie Sanders.
The world would enjoy him, and that's an important thing for America, to have a leader who is on your side.
And Hillary Clinton.
Two great candidates. One has a bigger resume than the other. That is how.
We are going now to South Carolina.
The top finishers in New Hampshire now head to the next contests in South Carolina and Nevada. Those Republicans who trailed far behind will have to reassess their presidential ambitions. Jim Malone, VOA News, Manchester, New Hampshire.
Well, the World Food Program says Haiti's third consecutive year of drought has doubled the severely food insecure population and driven people more deeply into poverty. The WFP says 3.6 million Haitians face food insecurity. WFP climate analyst Rogerio Bonifacio says many are placing the blame on the El Niño weather phenomenon.
The current El Niño event has started in March 2015. Has peaked in December, being one of probably the strongest in record, and will wind down towards the middle of 2016. Its effects, however, will be felt all the way to early 2017. And these effects have been widespread geographically. El Niño has caused impacts on the growing seasons of Central America and Haiti, Ethiopia, where it registered one of the driest seasons in the past 50 years, all the way to Indonesia and Papua New Guinea, which again has also suffered one of the major droughts on record.
Well, the UN agency says the 2015 harvest was below average, and in some places losses reached 70%. Agriculture employs half of Haiti's workers, where 3/4 of the population lives on less than $2 a day. The World Food Program says it will increase its assistance to Haiti, distributing food rations and cash to 1 million people. It will also pay 200,000 Haitians in exchange for work on watershed management and soil conservation projects. Now, U.S. intelligence officials say nuclear arms programs, terrorism, and cyber espionage are among the top national security challenges facing the United States. VOA's Zlatitsa Hoke has more.
North Korea has restarted one of its plutonium production reactors and could soon have enough to make nuclear weapons. The communist regime also has taken steps toward developing an intercontinental ballistic missile system. U.S. intelligence officials made these statements 2 days after North Korea conducted what is widely considered a ballistic missile test, and weeks after the regime conducted its fourth nuclear weapons test.
Pyongyang continues to produce fissile material and develop a submarine-launched ballistic missile. It is also committed to developing a long-range nuclear-armed missile that's capable of posing a direct threat to the United States.
Clapper said Iran also is determined to preserve its nuclear program, despite a deal Tehran has struck with 6 powerful nations to halt it in exchange for lifting international sanctions. The 2 intelligence officials also said the Islamic State group has become the preeminent global terrorist threat.
ISIL will probably attempt to conduct additional attacks in Europe and attempt to direct attacks on the U.S. homeland in 2016.
One of the biggest threats to the national security and economy is cybercrime originating in Russia and China.
Whether China's commitment of last September moderates its economic espionage remains to be seen.
Russians, on the other hand, are paranoid about NATO, said Clapper.
They're greatly concerned about being contained and, of course, very, very concerned about missile defense, which would serve to neuter what is the essence of their claim to great power status, which is their nuclear arsenal.
President Barack Obama on Tuesday announced new measures to enhance cybersecurity, including educating Americans on how to protect their privacy when they use the Internet. Zlarica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Well, across Africa, citizens are continuing to hear president after president state their case to stay longer in office. In Cameroon, there have been calls from supporters of President Paul Biya for him to run again. Now, the 83-year-old president has been in power for more than 3 decades. Biya was prime minister for 7 years, beginning in 1975, then became president following the resignation of Cameroon's first leader, Hamadou Hadjo. In 2008, he revised the 1996 constitution to remove presidential term limits, allowing him to contest and win the 2011 election. Biya is now serving the 4th year in a 7-year term. Well, for some insights into Cameroonian politics, I'm joined by Eric Chinje, CEO of the African Media Initiative, who's also a native of Cameroon. Eric, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much.
Biya is 83 years old. Now they say his supporters want him to run again. How much of those supporters reflect, the wish of the citizens of Cameroon?
Supporters would always, obviously, support who their leader is. Exactly. But even amongst those supporters in Cameroon, I happen to know, you do not have, there's no real consensus on whether or not the president should run. Talk to, just pull them out of that crowd and talk to them externally, and you'd find a whole different response.
Now, from the outside, Cameroon has never been seen to be like one of those countries where there's a vicious repression of the opposition. Is that something we don't get to know, or is it that the people of Cameroon have just accepted the status quo for all those years?
Well, let me say this about the President Biya. One, he likes to stay beneath the radar. He doesn't like attention. So he obviously does everything to stay away from you guys, from the international media, from national media attention. Secondly, he's a very informed leader. He knows what everybody is doing, and I think he spends a lot of time informing himself on what's going on in Cameroon. And this image of the man has somehow been articulated enough for people to know, so that those around him, who invariably are those who ought to be vying for power, cannot do it.
Well, there's some, we know some opposition, I can't mention some names here, but is there a vibrant opposition that could give him a threat even if...
No. That's part of the problem. That's part of the problem in Cameroon, as in most other African countries. I think it's for leaders. And in a recent interview, I called on the president to please not consider just those around him who have a direct stake in what they're doing.
And actually what's happening, I mean, the continent was kind of moving away from this long-serving president. Now we're hearing things in Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda, perhaps Kabila, Chad and
Congo, and
so what's going on the continent?
Well, I think Africa is coming into its own. These changes, which came about as at the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Berlin Wall, and seemed to have been imposed by not only these foreign governments, but external institutions upon which these countries depended for their economic, financial assistance. So what is happening now, what we are seeing now, is a continent that is finally coming to terms with its own political, economic evolution. And in some cases, like as in Burkina Faso, they've been able, the population has been able to stand up and say, this is what we want. We don't want, to give themselves an option.
But otherwise...
In other countries, it's not the case. Yeah. But I think, most countries are at various stages of finally having the citizens take control of the politics. And until it gets there, nothing is going to happen.
So even in Cameroon, it will have to be the people at some point.
It will have to be the people in Cameroon because we did not have an opposition that is capable of standing up to Mr. Biya. But 20 years ago they did, and they could have, because they could have ridden this wave of popular need for change, which is what they did. John Frundi, you may have heard that name, was the leader of the opposition at the time and could have taken over, but he didn't. And you don't have, right now, there's nobody else.
We'll watch and see. 83, another term, 7 years, that's 90. Anyway, thanks a lot.
We hope he doesn't run in spite of what people are saying.
Eric, thank you. Thank you very much. Eric Chinje is the CEO of the African Media Initiative. We thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out all headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, as oil prices fall, a rocky year ahead for Nigeria. Stay with us.
For a healthier planet.
There may be gold atop the minaret, but a new mosque being built in Massy, France is definitely green. Mahmoud Ismail is a member of the Muslim Committee of Massy.
We thought that in Islam, ecological principles have existed since the 14th century, and nowadays the world is coming back to this.
Ismail says there are invisible, environmentally friendly elements incorporated into the structure, such as double insulated walls. Then there are more apparent green aspects of the mosque.
We have the reminder of traditional mosque elements, that's to say the minaret and the dome. But now both have new functions. The minaret is a light well for the entry hall, and the dome, which became a glass dome, brings all the light to the big prayer room.
Ismail says the environmentally friendly mosque cost about 20% more of the total budget, but he says the money will eventually be recovered. Rebecca Ward for VOA's Green Beat.
Well, it's time for our business report, and we're joined live from New York by Africa 54 business reporter Jill Malandrino. Well, Jill, Kenya, Rwanda, and Ethiopia are experiencing growth, while resource-rich countries like Nigeria and Angola are struggling to survive.
That's true. Good morning, Vincent. The former finance minister of Zimbabwe, Tendai Biti, told the investing community at the Investing in African Mining Indaba annual conference this Tuesday that diversification is key. But African leaders in resource-rich countries have not learned that lesson yet. However, he said the silver lining to the current slump was for policymakers to see this as an opportunity. And that's a sentiment that was also expressed in the National Bureau of Statistics of Nigeria Outlook report earlier this week as well.
Now, is the major issue here oil prices?
That's part of it, but the focus for this conference is on mining, whether it be a particular mineral, diamonds, iron, or gas. The issue is global commodities are in a slump. And during the boom, leaders put an unnatural focus on a specific sector while ignoring other areas of the economy. They failed to industrialize around commodities and never put resources back into the community. BT pointed out that poverty is at its worst where the actual minerals have been extracted.
Now, you did mention that Rwanda is experiencing growth. What is it that Rwanda is doing right that other countries are not?
The key to African nations competing in the global marketplace and attracting foreign investment is first and foremost transparency, and that is what Rwanda is doing right. It ranked well in the World Bank's Doing Business 2016 report regarding the ease of doing business, which encourages investor confidence. The other part of the equation is Rwanda's aggressively growing sectors outside of commodity dependence. Construction and development is one such example. The important thing to understand is operating as transparent as possible with minimal bureaucracy lends to a healthy operating environment, and that will earn the trust of the international investing community.
Excellent, Jill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vincent.
Well, Africa 54's business reporter Jill Malandrino reporting live from New York. Now, the global fall in the price of oil has rattled the economies of many petroleum exporters, and Africa's oil king, Nigeria, is no exception. As Chris Stein reports from Lagos, analysts are predicting a rough year ahead for the continent's top producer of crude.
This is where Nigeria's money is made. Oil brings in about 70% of Nigeria's government revenue and makes up 69% of its exports. But it's not worth as much as it used to be. In years past, oil hovered around $100 per barrel, but the price has since dropped to $35 per barrel. That decrease in price has analysts worried.
Impact of the fall in oil price is, to put it mildly, catastrophic, in the sense that in terms of magnitude, huge. In terms of preparedness to deal with the magnitude, totally ill-prepared.
President Muhammadu Buhari won election last year on promises to turn around Nigeria's fortunes. He's proposed a budget that increases spending by about a quarter and invests in infrastructure. That investment is sorely needed across Nigeria, not least in the northeast, where the Boko Haram insurgency has razed towns and destroyed villages. Though oil makes up just under 10% of GDP, head of energy research at EcoBank, Dolapo Oni, says it is crucial for the government to pay its bills.
It really reflects the fact that Nigeria is still very dependent on oil, for government revenue, for spending by government, for FX, for the banks, for the oil companies. So it still reflects the fact that the economy, though diversified, is not well structured.
Economists are already predicting a slowdown in economic growth. The government has resisted calls to allow the naira to devalue, even though it's lost about 50% of its value on the black market. The global oil price fall has shown the weaknesses in how Nigeria manages its petroleum industry, but it also offers opportunities. Oni says the government has started making reforms to its fuel subsidy regime and to the state-run oil company, both of which have been accused of waste and mismanagement by analysts and civil society. Chris Stein for VOA News, Lagos.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, the growing power of fashion bloggers. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. The NGO Save the Children says Ethiopia needs $245 million in food aid to prevent a potentially catastrophic escalation in acute malnutrition. In Ghana, members of parliament mourn their colleague Joseph Boakie Dankwa, who was stabbed to death in his home in the capital, Accra. The United Nations Security Council urges a strategic response to tackle the growing threat from the Islamic State group, especially in that country. In Nigeria, radio station Dandalkura takes the fight against Boko Haram to the airwaves as Kano repeatedly suffers attacks from Islamists. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
I am Sheikh Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international calling talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
There was action outside the debate hall.
political season is about to change, too.
VOA News, Las Vegas.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. A New York Fashion Week kicks off Wednesday, and insiders are preparing to see what will be trending in the fashion world. Over the past few years, technology has had a hand in changing the guest list at Fashion Week, from the fashion elite to now include social media stars who have proven they deserve to sit front row. Although the practice of blogging was once frowned upon, now more than ever, fashion houses are turning to them for help in spreading the word about their brands. For bloggers, keeping their audiences instantly informed is key during the 7-day parade of show. Well, next up, many are still talking about Beyoncé's Super Bowl performance of Formation, a power anthem to race and feminism. The performance featured female dancers dressed in black shorts, crop tops and berets in what was perceived as an homage to the black nationalist Black Panther Party movement of the 1960s and 1970s. Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani says it was outrageous that she used it as a platform to attack police officers who are the people who protect her and protect us and keep us alive. Twitter user Mr. Brightside responded, "If Beyoncé's performance inspires you to wage a war against cops, then you need to get your head checked." And an ad immediately following Beyoncé's Super Bowl performance announcing her Formation World Tour begins in April, her first major tour in 3 years. Well, and finally, if you were on Facebook, Twitter, or other social media yesterday, you may have seen this bizarre story. A 24-year-old man has been arrested in Florida after allegedly throwing an alligator into a fast food restaurant. On Monday, Joshua James was charged with assault with a deadly weapon without intent to kill, illegally possessing an alligator, and petty theft. Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation officials say he threw a 3.5-foot alligator through a Palm Beach County Wendy's drive-through window on October the 11th. A wildlife officer says James drove his pickup truck to the window at about 1:20 a.m. After an employee handed James his drink, he threw the alligator through the window and drove off. No one was hurt. The alligator was released into the wild, and that is what is trending today. Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching from all of us in Washington. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Be careful when using this idiom. Over the hill.
My friend's 40th birthday is this weekend. As a present, I think I'll get her a funny over-the-hill t-shirt I saw at the store this weekend.
Are you serious? I don't care how funny it is. Nobody wants to think of themselves as over the hill.
You're right, I know. Instead, I'll get her a Life Begins at 40 coffee mug.
Over the hill means someone or something is old and does not have much value. The saying often is used jokingly for someone who is turning 40 years old because they are at the middle of their life. It can be a rude thing to say to someone, even a friend. And that's English in a Minute.